Welcome to the world of wall mounts. We at CSFG are thrilled to see that you have chosen to use our chassis for your piece of art. Since you've made this awesome choice, we also presume that you know your way around building a PC and thus will only go through how to assemble this case. Building it, that's something we'll leave for you to decide. These 4 wall distances are attached with 4 screws each from the front. These are the ones that grants the case the room for both airflow from the radiators and cable management. The 2 top ones are also where the wall mount attaches and keeps the case on the wall. The case comes with 4 glass distances. These can either be attached now, early on, or at a later point, and their only function is to keep the hardened glass cover in place. Make sure they are well attached as the glass is quite heavy. A power supply shroud in aluminum is included in the package. This is held together by the cover stretching between the top and the bottom part of the shroud and attached with 1 screw on each side. We advise you to assemble it early on to see how you want to adjust the power supply shroud and the power supply holder depending on the length of the power supply. Once you have decided on the shroud and holder's position, we advise you to remove the top cover to have an easier time connecting your cables to the power supply. Next up is the power button. Pull the cable through the middle path of the aluminum housing until the button is firm in its middle position. Then place the button on top of it. Insert the button from the backside into the hole in the middle and bottom of the case. Attach it with the 2 screws from the front. The power supply holder is, as mentioned before, adjustable in 3 different positions. Depending on the length of your power supply, you can choose how you want it placed to make sure you get the look that you want. A very important tip here is to mount the hard disk drive mount before you mount your power supply, as it's fastened behind the position of the power supply. Another important tip is that you mount your power supply before you mount your pump top on the left side, or else you might have a hard time attaching the power supply to the holder. The holder is attached with 3 screws screwed from the back side of the case. The already mounted power supply shroud is attached with 4 screws from the back side of the case. Before you tighten these screws, you can adjust the position of the shroud horizontally to get that look you want. The support for the graphics card is composed of 2 pieces. The first one is attached with 2 screws from the back of the plate. The second one makes the support's height adjustable. It's inserted in the first part and can then be locked into place with a small locking screw from the side. That way the placement of the graphics card can be slightly adjusted to make the routing of the tubes easier to align. The case comes with 5 distances for ATX motherboards. Each one of them is attached with screws from the back side of the plate. Another important tip here is to make sure that you assemble and mount your 2.5-inch drives with the SSD holder first, as the SSD holder is attached with 4 screws from the front under the position of the motherboard. If you install the motherboard first, you will not be able to install the SSD holder later. The graphics cards holder is composed of 3 pieces: bottom plate, the top and the bottom part. They're held together with screws under the bottom plate. The holder is then attached to the case with 3 screws from the back side of the case. Don't tighten these too tight early on, as you might want to adjust the placement of your graphics cards when you start routing your tubing for the waterfall. The SSD holder is attached on the back side of the case with 4 screws holding it from the front. Again, make sure you assemble this before you install your motherboard, as the motherboard will cover the screw holes. The case comes with a vibration absorbing HDD holder. It's mounted on the back of the case with 4 screws from the front. These screw holes are placed under the position of the power supply, and we'd like to remind you again to mount your HDD before you mount your power supply. If you have made the choice to get the pinion distribution plates, you will notice that you have 2 distances that the pinions are attached to. The pinions are mounted with 4 screws going in through the distances from the backside into the pinions themselves. Make sure that you do not tighten these too tight as the threading goes into the acrylic, and tightening too hard might crack the acrylic. The Spectre D5 pump top is another peripheral that you can purchase for our chassis. For the Crow case, we'd like to remind you to install them after you have installed the power supply, as you might have a hard time to install the power supply after the pump tops are installed. The Spectre comes with an O-ring sealing that needs to be placed within the Spectre itself. Then place your D5 pump in the Spectre and thread the aluminum distance through the cable down on the acrylic part to lock the pump in place. To make sure it's tight, attach the 4 screws and tighten them diagonally from each other. Remember, do not tighten too hard as the threading goes into the acrylic and too much force might crack the acrylic. Once these 4 screws are in place, insert the pump cables through the corresponding hole in the wall mount and then place the pump through the hole. From the back side, you then have 4 screws that go through the wall plate into the aluminum distance. Make sure these are well tightened to avoid vibrations from the pump. Thank you for listening to this manual. If you have any questions or run into trouble, feel free to join our Discord channel, which you can see in a link below. Here you can find others who have used the case or get hold of company officials who can give you advice. In terms of RMA, if you have purchased our products through a retailer, you must talk with the retailer first and foremost. We wish you the best of luck with your art project. Thank you.